What's going on, Tom?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's it going, buddy?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I can't complain too
Sound
much.
like, let me see. You sound like you're far away. What's going on here?
Let me oh, you know what? Let me double check. Yeah. Now we sound better.
There we go. Yeah, you do sound good. I got to change this title because we're going to talk about $1 Million Podcast. So let's see if I can do that while we're in here.
There
I
you
don't
go.
know that.
I was gonna say, I was coming into the room and I was like, is the customer always right? I was like, didn't we talk about that? Am I having deja vu? I feel like we talked about that last week.
Well, if I could edit this while we were in here, I don't know. That might be a tall task.
Well, I don't know. You are pretty tech savvy. So
Well, okay. You give you talk for a minute, and I'm going to try to do it. So hold on.
that's a dangerous thing to do, Dom, is to just ask me to talk for a minute, because you never know where that's going to end up, and I can talk for a minute. So I don't know. So yeah, I guess what's new in my world? Well, we're just coming off of a 10-day stretch of family visits. So it's been a sort of hectic, schedule-less, routine-less 10 days. Becky's mom and her husband were in town visiting all last week. And then my sister came through New York on her way back to Illinois from visiting my folks up at their place up in Canada. So she came through New York on her way home, kind of took a detour to come through and meet her niece Isla for the first time. So that was the last 3 days of that. So yeah, so it's been a hectic 10 days of just crazy schedules and being out of the house for big chunks of the day. Most days, at least definitely for Becky and Isla. I mean, I was here working all last week, during the day, but then would run over to meet up with them at their hotel where Becky had been hanging out with her mom for dinner every evening. So it's been a crazy 10 days. I'm looking forward to today's a little bit busy, no visits, but just I have a bunch of stuff to do. I have to go scout a location for a shoot later this afternoon. And I have a call right after this morning about another project coming up. So a bunch of stuff, balls in the air, juggling, right? Like as always, but making it work. And everybody is, happy and healthy, and we're doing relatively okay, I think. And then on top of all that, I've got my Ironman race coming up in a couple of weeks. So I'm getting ready for that, trying to finalize my training, hoping for a really good result when I get down there. So yeah, I actually didn't go. Instead of going for my bike ride this morning before we got on the live stream, I went to the grocery store to get some grocery shopping done because it was so chilly this morning that I was like, you know what? I don't really want to ride in this. It's a little too cold. It was in the mid 40s this morning. It was 44 degrees at my house when I got up this morning. 44 degrees on September 4th, which is wild. But I'm sure the pendulum will swing back the other way and it'll be like 100 degrees in October. So who knows? It's all crazy. But that's what I got going on. Was that enough minutes of talking?
That was a good opening. I'm enjoying Tom's life. It's hey, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and Billy said that he was 440 months old. So how many weeks? What was he? 440 weeks old. So, or something like that. How old is Isla now?
Isla is just about 2 months.
Okay, there we go.
So
now you're in the months. Now you're in months right now.
Yeah. Oh. She'll be 2 months next Tuesday. So she's almost 2 months. Exact number of weeks, I'm not really sure. I mean, today is a Wednesday and she was born on a Wednesday. So today would be the day. I can look at a calendar and count, but off the top of my head, I'm genuinely not sure.
All right, fair. Good stuff. Okay. So I tried to go up in the top and change it. I think I did somewhere, but today
I just changed it.
Oh, you just there we go. I see it. $1 million podcast, $100 million podcast. So that's what we're talking about today. $100 million podcast.
100 million. Okay, I'll put 100 in front of it.
Yeah, put 100. That's even a better title. $1 million podcast is good. So here is you can do it from your car. You can do it from your basement. You can do it from your back patio. You can do it with your friends. And people are making $100 million, $30 million a year, signing the Kelsey brothers, Smartless. We know Rogan's leading the pack. Sirius XM is now buying podcast. So that's the subject today. Jason, Brian, you two are hosting podcast. Maybe you're the next $100 million guy. So Tom, maybe we're the next $100 million. Maybe we're the first $1 billion people. Why not? So there's this platform ready for creators that you can do your own thing. You can be niche, you can be broad, you can talk politics, you can talk the New York Knicks, you can talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates or the Steelers. I should start one on the Steelers. So anyway, that's the subject today, Tom. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got to be honest. I think the era of the $100 million podcast is going to be short. And it's really because I think there a lot of these sort of situations, these investments that they've made, I think Joe Rogan was really the one that kicked it off in terms of a podcast being bought and brought over to Spotify exclusively, et cetera, et cetera. Like the amount of money that deal was worth, I think, A, sort of started this trend, but B, also sort of was at the same time a death knell for it. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to see that over time, these organizations, these companies like Spotify and like some of the others that are investing big money into buying out the intellectual property or the rights to distribution for podcasts. And in essence, what they're really buying is they're buying access to the ad revenue and control of the ad revenue dollars for those podcasts. That's what the purchase is, right? Like when Spotify buys Joe Rogan's podcast, they're actually not really interested in the podcast itself. What they're interested in is the audience that it brings with it. They're paying for access to that audience. And I think that what they're going to find over time is that they way overpaid. I think it's going to take them, what we're going to end up seeing is it's going to take them way too long to make that investment back. And so I think it's going to kind of fall off a cliff. That's my thought. I think this idea of $100 million podcasts, I think, are going to sort of fall off the cliff in the same way that we're seeing a move away from sort of the $100 million blockbuster film production too, right? Because they're just nuts. It's too big a gamble. It's too big a risk for these companies to take consistently, right? So we're going to see sort of a surge of it. And some of it is companies just trying to outpace each other and outpay each other, so to speak, for these sort of large audience podcasts. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to go the way of, the $100 million movie, where they are few and far between, right? Where every once in a while you hear about somebody's podcast gets bought for $100 million or several $100 million, but it's not going to be sort of the regular occurrence of these multi-10 million, tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars buyouts that we're seeing right now. There's not going to be as many of them. They're going to be few and far between. And I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. That's my sense of it. So I'm not holding out hope to be the first $1 billion podcast, Dom. I'm sorry. I was called a wet blanket when I was in first grade because even then I was apparently a little too pragmatic for my teacher. She literally called me a wet blanket. I went home and I asked my parents what that meant. And they explained it to me, and I was like, "Well, that's not very nice for a first grade teacher to say to a kid." But But yeah, I'm just being pragmatic. I'm being realistic, and I just genuinely don't see how it can continue. Like, where do you go, right? Like, $1 billion podcast, that's absurd. It's absurd. The amount of time it would take to make that money back is just insane.
Come on now. Okay, let's talk about this. So Swift, you're going to sell for $100 million. So let's go on. What do you think? Is it? Oh, Swift's gone. He'll probably be back. Brian, you selling for $100 million? You think? Are you
No.
listening to more podcasts now? Are you checking podcast out over TV? What?
No, I'm not selling for that. I mean, it'll never get that big. I just don't see it getting that big. I don't know.
So you think it's done, like Tom, or you think it's
no? I agree with Tom. I agree with Tom. Somebody will have a niche that will catch, and they'll stay at it long enough. But it's having the ability to stay at it and still do all the other things you want to do. But I don't think you're going to. There's I guess I don't want to say there's no uniqueness out there, but it's I don't want to say it's a fad, but I mean I don't think you're gonna see it explode with multi-millionaires holding podcasts. I just don't think the value's there. I guess that's the best way of trying to put it. I'm complete.
That's fair. I wonder how much like a Ryan Seacrest makes on like top 40. Like, would you compare this with radio, or what genre for advertising revenue do you compare it with? I thought Swift was going to answer. Go on.
No, that's a good question. I'm thinking. I don't consider it radio because it's a lot of it's based on people's opinion. Even though I think there's people out there like Tom that even their opinions are extremely factual. But it's not radio. It's definitely not TV. It's there's no visual, so you can rule out anything visual, live streaming, and anything like that because it's not visual. So I guess comparing it to really what radio, and I don't think it's that. It's it would remind me almost of, and I'm showing my age, but I remember it picking up the phone and it being a chat line. If I don't think anybody here is old enough for that, but back in the day, you could pick up your phone and there could be several different people having a conversation on it from somewhere else, or you'd pick up somebody, and it's almost like that. And yeah, I just don't see the value. I'm complete.
I never had a party line, Brian, so I don't personally remember it, but I remember seeing it referenced in film and TV when I was a kid, and my parents have both talked about it because they also remember. I think my dad remembers and my mom remembers when they were young that like telephone numbers were not 7 to 10 digits long. There weren't like area codes or you would call up. You could actually call a switchboard. I think my dad remembers calling a switchboard or hearing his parents call a switchboard when he was a kid. Anyway, so I think there's a couple of things here that I think are worth sort of picking apart or digging into in terms of like what the ad revenue model kind of like resembles, because it's a bit of a mishmash. So I think one of the things that like radio really sort of is where ad revenue kind of started, then went to TV, but we see a very similar thing in radio and TV advertising in that it's very structured, right? There is a clear set time that the ad revenue is dedicated towards purchasing, and then within that time the advertiser produces a commercial that plays during that 30-second 60-second ad break or ad spot. Whereas like for podcasting, it's a different model in that So there are some podcasts where they have, but they don't, where they sell, to multiple sponsors, or they have multiple sponsorships per episode, but they don't sell a limited ad space. And similar to radio, a lot of times, like old school radio, the podcasters, the hosts of the show, will do the ad reads, right? So they do the read. So it's not wholly supplied by someone else. Maybe the script is supplied by the advertiser, and then the host does the ad read. But then there's been sort of a trend in podcasting that you didn't really see in radio. The strict adherence because of FCC regulations was you read the script as written, like you don't really ad lib, because there was danger of like creating an FCC violation and getting a fine, right? But you don't really run into that in internet distributed podcasts. And so what they're able to do is the hosts are able to sort of freelance in a way that radio hosts have not been able to, have been constrained from doing. They're able to essentially freelance and make the ads their own and add anecdotes. And I've actually even heard ad reads in podcasts where they will read in the script, insert personal anecdote here. Oh, I guess I'm supposed to talk about how I use this thing, right? And then they get into talking about how they use that product or why they subscribe to that service or whatever the case may be. So I think that there is sort of a clear difference there in the model, that there's a lot more room for sort of customization for the audience at the hands of the hosts of the show in sort of the podcast model. The other thing I would push back on, though, Brian, is that podcasts are not audio only. Radio is audio only. Podcasts are not audio only. In fact, Spotify, if you go, a bunch of podcasts on Spotify do have video components, and there's actually a way in the app to either watch the video. Joe Rogan's podcast is one, but there's other podcasts as well that have a video component within the app, within Spotify. So not separately out on YouTube, but the video is in the Spotify app. There's actually a preference in the Spotify app that you can say whether or not you want to use cellular data to play videos, or if you only want to do it over Wi-Fi. I personally, this is total aside, but I have mine set to not use cellular data, because I find that when I'm in a low coverage area, the podcast will consistently pause because it's trying to buffer the video at the same time, rather than just the audio. And obviously video files are a lot bigger than audio files. So it just makes the listening experience not great. And I don't need the video playing in the background on my phone, which is tucked away in a cubby while I'm driving my car, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. So it's audio only. Or while I'm out for a run, I don't need the video playing in the back pocket of my shorts while I'm running on my phone. So anyway, but I think there are some big differences there in the sort of flexibility that sponsorships and hosts have, or sponsors of podcasts and hosts have, advertisers on podcasts have, when it comes to customizing the message for the audience. And I would bet that yields a better return on investment for them than sort of more traditional advertising, which is one of the reasons why podcast sponsorship is so popular for a lot of companies. But that's my thought. What do you think, Dom?
Okay, I want to hear from the group. $100 million podcast. Are you on your way there? Is there a way to get there? Is it dying? So, Jason, are you, what do we call, I always use, like in my publishing business, benchmarks and metrics as I hopefully climb and continue to climb benchmarks, metrics. Oh, I'm here today. This worked. Oh, this thing that I set out, this now worked. One more step forward. So can you get there, or is it a shot in the dark? What do you think, Jason? Or is it all bullshit? Go on.
I believe you can get there. You know what? I mean, it was interesting, Tom's perspective. Tom was basically speaking as an authentic skeptic. And some people might like cringe at hearing the word skeptic, but skeptics and optimists are both needed. It's way the way that they gauge their observation points. No, and I mean, it seems funny, but it's real. Like there are practical people who say, well, this is what I see, what I can achieve, what I can do, right? And then there's the optimist. It's like, well, the sky's really the limit. What does that mean to you? So when it comes to whether someone could make $100 million at podcasting, if one person has done it, more can do it. I think that it's really up to you. It's if you, that's your destination and you want to sell for 100 million, then yeah, okay, that's the finished product. That's the goal, right? But what is hard for us to understand is like all the work and the variables that go into the from point one to point finish. We don't know. We don't control those. We can make a lot of efforts. We can try to reach, but I just don't believe in putting limitations, even when you're realistic, even when you're a practical person or a skeptic. I don't believe in doing that because you don't know your own capacity. I've been telling my friends, like, look, you underestimate your abilities, but you over anticipate your difficulties. And when people talk like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. Great. That's not where you're at. Fine. You haven't done it that way, and neither have I, but I'm willing to find out. And I like what Rick Rubin wrote in his book, The Creative Act. He's like, instead of thinking that you can't do it, it's like, I just haven't done it yet. So it's like, if that's really your goal, to reach $100 million and sell your show, great. And you could probably repeat the same process, because the storyteller, he's the one. Like, if you look at Joe Rogan, I don't know many people that watch his full episodes. I know people watch parts because he makes those clips, right? So even you guys make your clips, and I'm sure people go and look at what you make, but do they watch the whole piece of content? People are only interested in what they're interested in. So there's strong indication that small form content does better than long form. We don't know. There's apps and measuring tools that can tell us indications, but I always feel like there's a variable negligence gap that is not really seeing what's going on, but does kind of see. So I don't know. I mean, I just, whatever, if you want to go for it, who's to tell you no is not where you're at. I just don't want to do that. And what is your real goal? Make $100 million? I'm sure there's many other things you can do to make $100 million. It's just, what's the exchange? What are you willing to give up to have that in? So that's where I stop. And thank you for the time.
Hey, good stuff, Jason. We appreciate you. And one, I like that you called Tom a skeptic. So I'll clip that. He's a skeptic. But no, your point's valid. And sometimes I could be too, they say we all have blind spots. And I might have a blind spot sometimes of, well, I'm just going to knock down these 1,000 doors and make this happen. Well, maybe I need to back it down and be a little more pragmatic. So I try to balance that, but your point is strong there. So, okay, Tom, we rolling into Dr. Tachi, or you want to add something there?
I just wanted to throw in one thing. I mean, first of all, I've
You're a skeptic.
I've been called way worse than a skeptic, so I'll take it. I'm fine with that. I am skeptical of it. But I think the thing that I wanted to say was that at the end of the day, when it comes down to the $100 million goal, right, of a podcast, of maybe producing a podcast and then trying to turn it into $100 million podcast, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad goal to have. Where I wasn't really talking about goal setting. What I was talking about from the individual perspective, what I was talking about the overall sort of industry trend and what I think is going to happen with the industry and the prevalence of people being willing to spend $100 million to secure exclusive rights to a podcast. And I think that is going to fall off. Does that mean that I don't think you should try to build an incredibly valuable brand around your podcast? Absolutely not. I 100% think that you should try to do that if that's something you want to do. Absolutely 100%, go after it. But in terms of the industry trend, I think over time we're going to see a pretty sharp decline in companies securing the exclusive rights to podcasts for tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what I think is going to happen. So, in terms of an industry trend. So I just wanted to clarify that, like the kind of the separateness, or like, the fact that those were two kind of like distinct thoughts. So hope that makes sense. Next up, we got Dr. Tachi, who's in here. So Dr. Tachi, we're talking about $100 million podcast. Will it continue? Will we see this trend continue? You got Joe Rogan sort of kicked it off, but then, you've got podcasts like Smartless and the Kelsey brothers and all these other podcasts being acquired for vast sums of money. Are we going to see this trend continue? Is it possible to build a podcast aimed towards the goal of selling the rights to it for crazy amounts of 8-figure, 9-figure numbers? Or what do you think is going to happen with that trend that we're seeing?
Futurism. Good morning, everyone. So a few things here. You totally could start a podcast with the goal of it eventually being acquired, but all we have to do, even though these are separate fields, all we have to do is look at the advent of all these apps that came up, and their only goal, they had an idea that they thought would work, but then their real goal was to get acquired and make a whole bunch of money. And what that ends up doing is leaving the end user frustrated, because you can always tell when somebody's about to sell, or get acquired, or close, because the tech support stops being engaged, the owners stop being engaged, all those types of things. There are glitches that never get fixed. And so even though that's kind of a different thing, if you look at podcasting in that same light, if you are only starting a podcast with the end goal of it being sold, you're completely, in my opinion, missing the point of a podcast, which is to engage a community and engage listeners / viewers. Because then it all becomes all about the money, and why do you care what you say if you're only engaged in the money? And as foolish as we like to think audiences are, they are not that foolish. They will catch on to you eventually. So money cannot be the only goal. Can you do it? Yes. Can it be the only goal? No. On the business side of it, and it's all the business side, that's not a sustainable model. So what's happening now is you keep hearing about the Kelsey brothers, and you keep hearing about, especially like you said, Joe Rogan started it off with the 200 million that he got, and everybody's like, oh, we can build a podcast, we can make 200 million. Well, no, you can't. And I'm not trying to be rude, but it's the same argument that people use for, oh, well, not Steve Jobs. Was it Steve Jobs? I forgot who they keep pointing to who did not go to traditional college. Okay, Zuckerberg dropped out, and so they keep using those as the model, when the reality is the overwhelming majority of people who get to that point have gone to college, and you don't have to go to college to be able to make it and live well. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, for the majority, that's probably going to be the route that you have to take. So people doing something that another person did because it worked for them is probably not the best thing to do. So there are a lot of people that are getting into the game now, and have been getting into the podcast game since it started becoming big. Like, I would say it really started to grow wings like 10 years ago. It started to really grow wings. So they got into it because of it, and everybody has a podcast. And then during the pandemic, it grew even more because we were, sequestered all day. So now even more podcasts came about. So I think, to sum this up, if you're doing a podcast, it has to be about building community first. And then secondarily, this is my opinion, secondarily, we can make money because you built something great and people value it. Not because you're trying to sell value that you have not earned. That's number one. And then number two, from a business standpoint, paying $100 million, $200 million a shot for podcasts, even if you're not doing it for everyone, that's not a sustainable model, in my opinion. Where is the ROI going to come from with that. Now, what I do think is you can do well with a podcast, definitely, but you can't expect one platform to give you all the money for it. It has to be multiple streams of income. You have to do different things for that. And for the overwhelming majority of people who will do well with podcasts, whether it's audio only or video as well, it's going to be a combination of different monetization methods that get you there. Maybe not to the 100 million, but maybe to the 100 million. So those are my thoughts.
I mean, I think Dr. Tachi, you nailed that. I think look, you know how I feel about building community and delivering value to your audience. So I absolutely believe and agree with you wholeheartedly that should be the primary focus of the content that you put out and the podcast that you build. It should be focused on delivering value first for your audience. And then returning value to you second. And in this case, we're talking about value to you through sponsorship, right? And through ad sales. And I also agree that it's not a sustainable business model. The $100 million, I would actually love to see, because I know they exist. They're not public, but I know they exist, that Spotify has projections and they've laid out a timeline of when they expect Joe Rogan's podcast to actually start earning them money, right?
I want Tom, you mind just, what do you have on that number? Like,
no, I have no idea. I have no idea what it is, but I want to see the projections, because I'd be willing to bet that it's a long time before they realize any real profit on that investment, any real gain on that.
I'm coming in here hot because I'm just wondering, like, if they bought it for 100 million over 10 years, he puts out X amount of shows. I mean, Super Bowls don't get, how many downloads does one of his shows get? Like, I mean, I wonder if he gets like more downloads than a Super Bowl. Like, why shouldn't his ads cost $500,000 an ad? I don't know what they cost, but why not?
I mean, first of all, I'm sure they're per ad, they're not anywhere close to that. But we're talking about $200 million, right? $200 million, right? And so from that one deal, they have to make $200 million before they realize any investment, any gain on that investment, right? So first, they're $200 million in the hole. They got to get back up to level ground first before they see any profit from that investment. And my bet is it's going to take a really long time to do. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why 10 years is an age in media. There is entirely a possibility that in 5 years, Joe Rogan's podcast could fall out of favor and their downloads could go from 10 million an episode to 10,000 an episode, right? I mean, that's entirely possible. The public is fickle, right? Media is a constantly changing and evolving industry, and staying at the pinnacle of it for decades on end is a virtually impossible task, right? So I think it's a very risky long-term investment to make in a media property like a podcast. And so I think that's one of the main reasons why I think it's going to peter off, because it's not sustainable. It's not possible to realize a return on that investment in a time frame that suits the organization or the industry writ large. I think the other thing too, to Dr. Tachi's point, where she made the analogy to what happened with the app industry, where people were building apps just to sell them, just to be acquired. And we saw, one of the big things we saw there is like economics 101, right? A ton of people jumped in to the app game, right, to build apps to simply get them acquired. And you ended up with a massive spike in supply of apps, coinciding with a degradation of quality of those apps, because they weren't being built to deliver a particular product. They were being built for perceived value to be sold, right? So they were basically being spit shined and put up for sale, right? And not actually really delivering on their promise. It's like you could shine up the outside of a car, but and spend a ton of money on it and then pop the hood and realize there's no engine in there, right? It's not actually going to take you anywhere. So we saw that kind of thing happen with the app industry. And I think Dr. Tachi nailed it with that analogy. I think the podcast industry and the app industry, there are definitely some very strong analogies there, some strong parallels. So I think that was a really apt description. So with that said, I just want to rewind a little bit, or as people used to say in Clubhouse, I want to reset the room. Although obviously we're not just on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is the platform we use to kind of get people into this conversation. But we're also live streaming across the internet, as we always do. So we're live on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn currently, and Twitch as we sit here talking. So welcome to everybody who's out there watching this, and to everybody who's here in the room with us. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. We thank you guys for being here. You guys make this possible. So thanks for being a part of our community. That is our goal, is to always return value to you. So we're so appreciative that you guys find the value in being here, and that you continue to support Dom and I, who are not the smartest guys in the room. So thanks for that. I saw John a couple of minutes ago. You had your hand raised. Did you have something you wanted to throw into the conversation?
Yeah, I want to add in some very quick. You do some a quick search on Google. Estimated downloads for Joe Rogan podcast. The Joe Rogan Experience has been downloaded more than 200 million times per month. 200 million times per month. The podcast has over 1.9 billion lifetime downloads, and we go on to it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there is a lot more to it. The podcast is just one part of the equation. Social media, email, newsletter, website, generating traffic from that, all that stuff goes in the equation of earning potential. And for those who don't think you can generate tremendous revenue on your own, I'm going to say this: stop doing it. Leave more room for people like me. Please stop, because you're just cluttering the space. If you're not going to be serious about creating something that you can earn revenue from, why are you doing it? That's the question I asked you. So if someone wants to offer me $100 million for sale for my radio show and podcast, I'll say, give me the paperwork right now. I'll sign in the bottom line. I'll turn everything over to you right now.
Hell yeah. John, how long do you think, and Julie, we're coming to the UK, we're coming to you, but John, how long do you think, based on the 200 million downloads, stuff like that, how long do you think it's going to take them to get a return on their investment, or will they?
Let's be honest. If we consider the staff, so the expenses of staff, and let's just say that's another $1 million a month. I would say, conservatively, if Spotify doesn't know how to make $1 per download of his show, they're idiots. Let's just say they make 25 cents per download of the show with advertisers. That's probably a more doable rate. So let's do 25 cents times 200 million. Probably be 4 months for the hit break even for their investment. When they talk about the hard cost of employees, let's add another 3 months in there. So I'd say probably on the outside about 7 months before they became profitable.
Okay, so just you're coming from a different world, so that's interesting. All right, I'm coming to you, Carrie. Julie, did you want to weigh in on this before we get down? So you help people start podcasts. You do media relations. Is this a world where you think, like, somebody comes to you? Are you saying, yeah, we can get you where you're making money off this? Or are you saying you need to go into selling widgets because podcasting is dead?
Well, podcasting, guys, and most of you guys have podcasts. It is not a linear path to profits. And if you have an open mind about it, you can make money off of podcasting for sure. It's a marketing arm. And Dom is a podcaster now. He is a podcaster of one of the top rated podcasts of all time called Creative Entrepreneur. And the thing is, it's an awesome way. It's an awesome lead magnet. It's an awesome way to make connections, partnerships. It's an awesome way to, it's not just about getting the advertiser or sponsor. There's a lot of non-linear paths to profits through podcasting, if you will. And I'm starting my third podcast tomorrow called Murder in Morton Grove. And that one is probably going to make, I'm going to say at its pinnacle, $100 million. So thank you, everybody. Good to see you guys.
Okay, why stop there? Why stop at 100 million? All right, Tom, is it show and tell time, or should we talk to Carrie first? We got a good conversation going.
Let's talk to Carrie real quick, and then we'll jump to show and tell.
Okay, so Carrie, we're not saying, we want to know, can you monetize? Can you get to 100 million? Can you get to 1 billion? Is it, like John said, at 25% a download? Like, that's why I love that, breaking down the metrics of it. It's not so crazy if the downloads are coming. But is it feasible? Will it die? Who knows? But that's very interesting. So Carrie, jump in wherever you want to go with it.
Okay, so I missed my opportunity of photographing Joe Rogan for a cover of The Improper Bostonian, who, ironically, my publisher for 28 years, went to high school with Joe Rogan. So I have a lot of friends who know him. $100 million in Hollywood is nothing. Okay, it definitely, they're going to make their money back pretty quickly. I saw Matt Damon give a speech about how he could make movies back in the day and why he can't now. And I know for a fact that Hollywood, the scripts and all the things are down about 40% post the writers' strike. So they're kind of at a moment like the magazine world. And so Matt Damon was saying if he had $100 million to make a film, he would need 50 million to make the film and 50 million to market it. But the theaters aren't generating the money that they used to, and then they've lost the DVD sales, which is like, what happened in the music industry. So I think, sure, like if you have a name, it's like anything. If you can have those downloads, it's exactly what John said. They're going to find a way to make their money back on that. They just don't throw that kind of money around. We're all Steve Jobs in the podcast world, where it's still early enough that it's going to change too. And I do believe, I have a podcast for 4.5 years, that it is a way to make money. And it's like what Julie said, I use that to bring in opportunities and clients every day. So so that's what I know. That was supposed to be quick and it wasn't. So
no, that's good stuff. So you're monetizing it in a different way. We get it that you can do that. You're saying if you have a name, you might get a head start, which we talk about a lot of ways. Yeah, that's happening. So understood. Thank you. Not the smartest guys in the room. $100 million podcast. So that's where we're at, Tom. What say you?
I think we should jump to show and tell. It's time. It is show and tell time. So what do you got for us this week?
Okay, I got something special for you. And Heather, Dante, Howard, if you want to come up, and we're talking about $100 million podcast after this special show and tell, come on up. Okay, Tom, here we go. So today I'm going to tell you about when my heart broke in 1992, and it is still broken today. As a young man, I loved baseball more than basketball, pre my fascination with Michael Jordan. The Pirates were such a good team back then, so I got my little Pirate starting lineup figures. Bobby Bonilla was my favorite. Then they traded him to the Mets, like the Pirates do. They had Van Slyke. They got rid of him. But the person that I want to show you that makes me the maddest is Sid Bream. This is Sid Bream here. We traded him to the Atlanta, and then when we traded him to Atlanta, we were in Game 7 of the finals one year in 1992, and this old guy with a beat-up leg scored from second base. We lose, and we haven't been good since. So I'm thinking I should have actually led a match to this and burned it, because it's been a curse since 1992. We've stunk. We only won the last championship was 79. So really, I was just a little bitty baby last time we won, and it is all because of Sid Bream here. So I'm not always positive. Sometimes people like Sid Bream and the Pirates now falling below 500 this year, and they're going to have another losing season. No World Series for me. So I'm brokenhearted, Tom, and it's because of Sid Bream.
Well, you still got, I guess on the upside, from your hometown, you still got your Steelers to root for, right? So you got at least, and it's kind of, we're getting into football season here, so you've got a hometown team to root for, and baseball season is winding down. So, there's that, I guess there's looking up in terms of that. It's funny, like the figurine of Sid Bream that you held up. I mean, I don't know his name. I know Bobby Bonilla, but I think that's because I was never a big baseball person, but I'm a New Yorker, and he played for the Mets. So I know that name. What's funny to me about that action figure, or that figure, is he looks like if someone were to draw a generic, like late 80s, like baseball player, right? Like, or late 80s, I know it was early 90s you're talking about, but like that sort of like late 80s, the Don Mattingly, like the guy, like the guy with the big mustache, right? Like that's the generic, like when I picture a generic baseball player. Yeah, exactly. Right. From that era, they all have like the big bushy mustache. So it just, I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, all the white guys have these big bushy mustaches from that time period. It was the Magnum, maybe it was the Magnum PI effect, that they were like, hey, you know who's really cool with a big mustache? Magnum PI. I'm gonna grow one of those. They were the height of fashion at the time, maybe. Anyway, I just think that's funny. But yeah, I appreciate it. I've never been a huge baseball fan. I did, with some buddies, have like upper deck nosebleed season tickets to the Yankees for a couple of seasons, and that was really just because it was fun for a group of us to go to those games together and have a good time. But I never really cared much about baseball. I never even played baseball, so never participated. It's too slow for me.
I'll agree with the slow thing. My buddy Jim down there, his brother Steve told me one time, like when my son was little, he didn't really like baseball, and I didn't understand that. I thought everybody liked baseball. And then Steve, who's all American, he told me one time, he said, I hated baseball. It was too slow. It was hot out in the field. The stuff rubbed on me, and I just hated everything about it. I was like, people can hate baseball. So that's how I learned. Okay, I want to reset this here on the 100 million podcast. So John, Julie, Carrie, Dr. Tachi, lead me with this question. If you want to, so somebody starting a podcast, is there a lowest hanging fruit on where they should be looking to, granted, I get Tom, community first. Now you're establishing a community. Is there a place where, this is how you would monetize first? Oh, you should have an ad. You should put it on this platform. You should have a class, a course. Is there anybody have that answer or a thought on that?
I do, but you all have heard it many times.
Go on, man. What do you got? Tell me.
I'd start with Facebook. It is easiest to grow a community there. It's the least expensive, and it's the easiest way to get people aware of your content. It is so mind-blowingly easy to do paid ads to get followers, and you can target those where you want geographically, age, gender, areas of interest. You can even select people that use iOS only and pay about 12 cents per follower. But most people don't do it. That's exactly where I'd start first.
Okay, John. So where does the money come from? So let's say I start a podcast, and then it's called the Jim Ajay Show. My buddy Jim Ajay, and he wants to talk about camping. He wants to talk about shooting guns or drinking beer, whatever he wants to talk about. So once he starts his Facebook page, when gets followers, where is and it's around his show, where is the money coming from?
This is where most people don't have any foresight, to be totally honest with you. Advertisers and sponsors, they'll pay to get in front of an audience, even if it's a small audience. If it is an engaged audience and it's a hard audience to get in front of, they'll pay even more. So let's just say, and it's a bad example because they're selling like hotcakes, but let's just say guns. All right. We know that they have a difficult time advertising on radio and television. So if you have a community of 3,000 rabid gun followers on your Facebook page, you got something of value to a gun advertiser. I'm using an example, and you can change it to anything. The more difficult it is, the harder, the more value you can build. Number two, this is where most people don't get it, and I really started transitioning away from. It's great having paid advertisers, and I do, but it is it's like pushing the shoulder up. I mean, the shoulder up the hill every month. Get your own stuff. Julie hit on it. Your own ebook, your own lead development with websites where people can win contests, whatever. All that stuff is of value. If you build an audience where people can find you, and by the way, when you get enough reach, you can qualify for Facebook performance bonuses where they pay you. You also get benefit of ads on reels where they pay you, ads on videos where they pay you, and it goes directly to your inbox. But it's a lot of work. But that's exactly where I'd start. So instead of focusing on who's going to pay you, create things that generate revenue for you, and then advertise it on your social media, your website, and your podcast as well.
John, man, we appreciate it. This is good stuff. And if anybody watches the replay, or so the question was, and I saw Dr. Tachi gave a heart, so I'm going to come to you real quick, Dr. Tachi, if you mind, or just a final thought before we get to Tom and the wrap up. If somebody is starting out podcasting, where do they go for monetization? What are any low-hanging fruit so they could leave here and say, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I should have done that. Dr. Tachi, anything that you could add?
John was right on the money, and that's an excellent thought, definitely. I would also say to check out making your listeners your patrons. If you are giving value, there are so many in your audience that would probably be happy to chip into building the dream. So doing something like a Patreon, there are a bunch of different platforms, but Patreon is is probably one of the most well known. And then you're offering something, in addition to the value of it. Maybe you're doing an exclusive first look or first listen. Maybe you have an exclusive interview that you're only keeping for your patrons. Maybe you're doing things like meetups, etc. So you're offering some exclusive or some perks to your audience in exchange for being a patron every month. So that's a way to start to monetize as well. And, as we know, it's going to be a combination of methods, not just one, but that's another way.
That's good stuff. I feel like today I'm leaving here and gonna start pushing like upload and gonna start making loot. Julie, Carey, any thoughts on you are helping somebody with a podcast or on your podcast? Any low hanging fruit, something that you've used along the way that anybody could say, yeah, this is a good idea. Like, I should have a Calendly link here. Like I have a Calendly link where I'll meet anybody for 40 minutes or so and we just talk books. But then there's another Calendly where should you want to like actually get like an hour and a half of advice and we're going to do it like this on any project you're working on, that's something different and they would pay in advance for that kind of meeting. So is there anything, Julie, Carey, that you guys have that you're like, yeah, this is the bee's knees, you got to do it? So going, what do you got? Julie, Carey?
I'll chime in. When you
Go
say
on.
calendar, I can't say the word. You got to remove the friction with people, and you've got to, if you ask them to be on your show, you have to strike while the iron's hot and you have to get them scheduled. And I think that's one of the hardest things. I know, being a business owner, having a full-time business, doing other things, and then doing the show, you got to streamline it the best you can. And so send them a link. I record usually from like noon on. So I give I give the time frame, but I try to be available because people are busy. But removing the friction and making it streamlined as possible is a tip I would give.
Okay, Carrie, you're the best. We appreciate you. Julie, you got anything? 3, 2, 1, Julie. Julie.
I have something, but I missed the question. Sorry about
Oh, Julie, the question is, you're helping somebody with a podcast. You're about to have your third podcast. Is there a way, low hanging fruit to make money where you can help pay for your podcast or get to that $100 million mark that everybody should be doing? What do you got?
low hanging fruit. You could try Podcorn, PODCORN. They match sponsors with like new podcasts with not as many downloads. Typically, advertisers like to see 10,000 downloads per episode. So this one kind of brings it back down. So you can try it out. It's highly competitive, but it's Podcorn, PODCORN.
Podcorn, good one. Thank you. Thanks for playing. All right, not the smartest guys in the room. $100 million podcast. Tom has all the answers. I'm done talking. So what do you got for us, Tom? What's the wrap up today?
Okay, yeah. So no pressure. Tom has all the answers. So first of all, Tom's going to start by saying he does not have all the answers, right? I'm just one guy with an opinion. I don't have all the answers. I promise you that. And there's even the opportunity that I'm wrong. But here's where I would kind of wrap this up. I think Dr. Tachi made a really good point about looking at these sorts of like massive $100 million, even tens of $1 million acquisition deals for podcasts as outliers, right? And what popped into my head was, there are exceptions to every rule, right? And these outliers, these massive podcast acquisitions are the exception, right? They are not the rule. So I think we sort of at our own peril treat them like they're the rule, right? It's great to be aspirational, and I encourage people all the time to set unreasonable goals. And if your unreasonable goal is to create a $100 million podcast, that's great. That's fantastic. My unreasonable goal is to humanize the world of business through better communications. That's a totally unreasonable goal. I will never accomplish that fully in my lifetime. And I know that, but I will get closer to it by trying than I ever would if I didn't try at all. Right. So I think it's absolutely okay and even a good thing to set unreasonable goals. But I think you also have to be a little bit pragmatic and understand that goal is likely unreasonable. Now, would I be completely over the moon and overjoyed and satisfied and happy if it turned out that I was able to single-handedly humanize the world of business through better communications, right? And create a better world to do business in? Absolutely. Who wouldn't be happy about that, right? But I understand that the likelihood is that I won't. And for most people with a podcast or with a radio show or with a hybrid platform show like ours, they're not going to create $100 million property. But that's okay. The other side of that is you absolutely can monetize even if your audience is relatively small, even if your podcast is relatively small right now, right? And will grow down the line. It's never kind of too soon to start thinking about how you convert the value you're providing to the world into dollar value for you, right? It's never too early to start thinking about how you monetize the value that you put out into the world, right? And I think we should all be fairly and equitably compensated for the value we deliver, whether that's for the job we show up for every day or for the content we create and share with the world and share with our audience to deliver value to them. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. But like I said, I'm just one guy. I could be wrong. Who knows? And I definitely do not have all the answers. I promise you that much. That much I know. I'm right about that one. I guarantee I'm right that I don't have all the answers. So that's all I got for today. Thank you all so much for being here with us yet again for another episode of Not the Smartest Guys in the Room. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. We value you guys. And we can't wait to see you again next week, next Wednesday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time here in Not the Smartest Guys in the Room, streaming all over the internet, and also available to watch later on a variety of services, including Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube and even Twitch. So check us out when you get a chance. We love you guys. We'll see you guys soon. Have a great